Hey everybody, hope everybody's doing well. Tonight, tonight we had to start at 7:20 tonight just because we had a little something come up at the house. I just need to take care of at 8. So I just wanted to start a little early because this is an important conversation that if you have Q&A, if you have questions and answers that I want to be able to get to. One of the things that comes up all the time when we're on calls with clients, me and our advisors is, what is this 4% rule? And should I do it? Should I not? Right? And the 4% rule is a very popular term when it comes to financial planning and it comes to how to make your 401k, TSP investments last the rest of your life, right? And so what that is if you take 4% of your balance, if it's 500,000, take 4% of that per year, then that should be able to last the rest of your life, right? But it's for federal employees, this should not be something that you utilize, because for federal employees, as I say often on all these calls, is your TSP is a wealth building tool. For private industry, for people in the private industry, their 401k is something that they depend on. It's their lifeblood, right? So we're going to go through that. And so if you ever talk to a financial advisor or you're watching television, just know that 4% rule does not apply to you. It does not apply to you at all, right? And so as we go through it, let me explain why, right? The 4% rule was created for people that have 401k and Social Security only, right? And as you know, the 401k came into existence about 30 years ago. So it's still a relatively new thing where people that are retiring who've used it for their entire career are just beginning to retire, right? People that are starting in the government now or starting in private industry before a couple years ago, they've had it their whole career. That most of their parents only have 401ks, but most of the people retiring right now, you're the first ones to have it all the way through your career, and finally you're retiring. Most people, again, are in the middle of their career. They're still building up. So you're really the first use case of what it's like to have a 401k, aka also TSP, right? And so this 4% rule was created along the way to help those that have 401ks be able to use their 401k and last the rest of their life. Because before 401ks, what people had were pensions, right? So civil service employees had pensions, right? The reason why civil service employees could walk around the office and be so confident or tell their stories about how they retired well is because, again, they were getting 80% of their pension. And they come to work, they show up, they make $100,000, they're going to get $80,000 a year for the rest of their life. Well, it's going to start at 80,000, but then they also get cost of living increases as well, right? And so, most people can live off 80% of their salary, right? But when it comes to 401ks, and TSPs, you're not getting that 80%. What you put in is what you get out, right? Only thing that's fixed for you is Social Security. But as federal employees, you also have this pension, this first pension, which as we go through makes a huge difference. So that 4% rule applies to people that have 401ks. It also assumes that there's no pension income. It's basically built on scarcity because it's trying to model the pension rules the pension framework that most people had before the 401k. So again, that 4% is like, if you do 4%, this can help you last the rest of your life. These accounts are also built for survival, again, scarcity, right? You take a little bit and then it lasts the rest of your life, right? And so 4% rule, if you hear it, doesn't apply to you. The difference, people in the private sector depend on their 401k and their Social Security only. They have two streams of income. You as a federal employee, you have your first pension. Most people, if you go through our retirement sessions, we show you in your retirement analyzer, your pension and Social Security, the majority of that covers your bills and your travel and lifestyle, right? And you leave your TSP for wealth building, right? And that's a conversation that I know I didn't grow up having. I know most of you who are on this call and people we talk to, most people didn't grow up having these wealth building conversations. And so the TSP is just flat out a wealth building tool. And that's something that we at Fed Legacy, especially right now, are taking very, very serious, because we see a lot of people who are sitting on a lot of money, or and money it's continuing to grow. And they're like, well, Mr. Smith, what do we do with this? And for me, someone from my culture, we didn't have these conversations. But, now I've been running Fed Legacy for so long, I'm well versed in the conversation. And now we need to have bigger conversations of how do we create businesses in the community? How do we, make sure our kids don't have any type of debt? How do we create, how do we build real estate portfolios? And that's a whole different conversation, but those are the tools that we can, double and triple our TSP based on how we elevate our unit, right? I mean, by doing different things, right? And so the difference though with you and private industry is the private industry, they don't have that same wealth building tool because the 401k is used for so much, right? And most financial advisors will tell you they have federal employees. When we meet with them and we're looking at their portfolios and reviewing what they have, most people, they will put you in really safe accounts. The majority of your money, we talk to people all the time and they're like, well, my advisor told me I need to move 80% of my TSP into an annuity because I'm afraid of the market. And we always tell, like, any advisor that will tell you to put more than 50% of your money into an annuity, it's crazy because, annuities aren't bad products. They're better than the G fund, but it's not something you need to put all of your money into. But most financial advisors don't look at you differently than they do the private industry people. And the private industry people need more of that secure growth because they need it for the income in the long run, right? Most financial advisors don't understand the federal income advantage, right? And that's something that we walk federal employees through, right? They're applying 401k strategies to TSP, and it just doesn't work, right? And those strategies of making sure you gain the bare minimum just so because you're not taking too much risk, that can cost you millions of dollars in compound interest over the long haul, along with not having a tax strategy, because they're putting you in fear-based accounts because they're treating you like the rest of their clients that they deal with, right? And here's an example of what a retirement scenario looks like for somebody in the private sector versus somebody that's a federal employee. Somebody that's in the private sector, they have 800,000 in TSP. That sounds like a lot. And we still meet with people in the private sector. And when we meet with them, if they have an 800,000, a million, if that's in the TSP, that's a lot. If that's in the private industry, it's not a lot. Because again, that 800,000, if you do the 4% rule, the person's in their 60s, that's just $32,000 a year, right? Plus the Social Security, which is $56,000. You think is a whole lot of money, but it's really not a lot, right? And so God forbid the person has long-term care issues. They run into, a family emergency. They want to help somebody out. It throws that whole formula off now because they're using the 800,000 as really the nest egg to feed their retirement for the rest of their life. I often talk about, as a federal employee, private sector, their 401k has multiple jobs, right? It's the long-term care provider. It's the family emergency provider. It's the Christmas gift provider. It's the college education fund. It has all these different goals, but the main goal is income, and that's a pretty big job. And so federal employees, on the other hand, let's say you have a $36,000 pension per year. That's something you have worked for your entire life. That's there. That's on autopilot. That's not going anywhere. And not only is that not going anywhere, the difference between the 401k and that first pension is the first pension has a cost of living increase that happens almost on an annual basis. And so with that 800,000, that's 32,000. They're not able to give themselves cost of living increases, right? You as a federal employee, you're able to you automatically get cost of living increases. Not only just on your first pension, you also get it on your Social Security, as do they, but it's not as much. But then you also have this TSP sitting in the background, 800,000 in it, right? Now this 800,000 in the TSP, because this $60,000 pretty much can pay all your bills. You might take an extra 2,000 maybe from the TSP per month, which is like what, 24,000 a year. Not a whole lot, but it makes a huge difference when it comes to planning out your retirement. And don't be married to a federal employee. Then it's even, then the difference is even greater, right? But this is why when it comes to when you're doing your financial planning, you want to deal with someone that has expertise with federal employees, because if they direct you the same way they direct this person who has 800,000 in their 401k, though that 800,000 has two different jobs. One needs to be invested very conservatively, very little risk tied to it, because it's the lifeblood of that person. For the federal employee, for you, you can really put the pedal to the metal with that and really invest it, with a bit more aggression, because you don't need it as much. One thing we always do is we've separated out into two buckets. We have your growth bucket and your protected bucket. And now there is some you want to have as protected, right? Not saying you want to have it all uh, invested aggressively. But that protected bucket, you protect that, put it in a good annuity, collect 6 to 8% on it per year, you're good. But then the rest of it, the majority of it, you want to let it sit in the seed fund somewhere like that so it can have some growth, right? And so, and that growth compounds tremendously over the years, right? We have clients now who, when they retired, had 700,000. Now they're at 1.1 million, and they're like, Mr. Smith, I mean, just 5 years ago, I'd had the 700. This money keeps growing. What do I even do with it, right? And that's where those wealth building conversations begin to come in. I always tell people, if you're a federal employee, you've saved a lot, you're really going to start having rich people problems, which is, how do I pay these taxes? How do I deal with these estate taxes? How do I divide this money up amongst my kids in a way that they don't act crazy? Those are good conversations. All right, how do I invest? Like, I had a conversation yesterday with the mother and daughter, and the mother, she had talked to me 11 years ago, right? And her daughter was like in elementary school. Now her daughter is a freshman in college, right? It's early in her college career, and so we were talking because they came into a little bit of money, and from a grandparent that passed, and we got on a Zoom call, and they're like, Mr. Smith, you remember when she was small? I'm like, yeah, I do. And now she's older. She's asking me questions about how to open up an IRA and a Roth IRA, and they want to start a business once she finishes college. What can they do with some of this money to invest it in a way that will allow them to? How do they get the tax advantages? And we're having those conversations, and I love those conversations. But in order to have those conversations, you got to be able to grow your money in ways that make sense. So when it comes to your TSP, the wealth building process is, in your working years, is all about accumulation. You have one job when you're working, and that is to accumulate your TSP. And that means putting, we always tell people, put at least an extra 1% in per year, right? That's one way. Make sure you're getting raises at the job, promotions. You navigate in ways in which to increase your income. As you can increase your income, the percentage that goes into your TSP increases. That's your one job. Your one job while you're working, well, not your one, but one of the most important jobs is to make sure you're accumulating as much as possible. That's your job, to accumulate as much as you can. Because once you get to that age where it's time for retirement, you're now unemployed, right? There's no more money coming in. So whatever you have, except for your first pension and Social Security, but there's no salary. You're making the most money you ever will when you're working, right? And so your job is to accumulate as much as you possibly can, right? And so that's your one job. Maximize your Roth contributions. Make sure you have some tax diversity. That's your job, right? Then phase 2 is right there around retirement. As those years leading up to retirement is where you start thinking about, how do I secure all this, right? And that's why we have that financial house framework I'm getting ready to walk you through. You start thinking in more strategy. How do I protect everything I built? And then the last piece is the legacy piece. And the reason why we're called Fed Legacy at the end of the day is, how do I turn this into something that lasts for generations for my family, right? That's what I'm in this for, right? This is why I started Fed Legacy, because I love that conversation. I love conversations like I had with the mother and daughter, how to start a business, right? I stepped down now, but I used to run the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce, helped start it, and have run it for 8 years, right? Because I'm all about how to build businesses in the community, because that's the only way that we're ever going to be competitive as a culture, right? And so building businesses, as you see the federal market is starting to change, we need to be hiring each other, right? That's the big deal. That's the thing. We need to be turn out kids. How about kids become job makers, right? So they can create things that are solutions to the problems in our community, right? That's what the legacy conversation. So phase 3 is after phase 1 you accumulate, phase 2 you retire, phase 3 you go into that legacy building phase. And so when it comes to the financial house and what we talk about here at Fed Legacy, if you ever go through one of our retirement sessions, our one-on-one retirement sessions, we build it out like this. The financial house, again, is just a metaphor, but we've been doing this for so many years that we've seen what works for clients who retire well and continue to amass wealth, and those that end up coming back to work or living in some level of fear around work, right? Because to me, if you're retired and you're still in fear, you're not quite sure what to do, that's not ideal, right? And so the ones that live that way don't have this structure set up when we meet them, right? And so this structure is a structure I want to teach you, and I want you to implement it in your life. If you want to talk to us and we help you do it, that's fine too. But definitely implement this, right? So you want to have your foundation, just like you have at your house. You have a foundation. If the foundation is cracked, your house more than likely is going to start leaning. You're going to have water damage in the basement. Your roof can crack. It's a sealant. The walls can crack. So your foundation is the most important part of the house, right? The deeper the foundation, the higher the house can be. A lot of the reasons why the foundation is so critical. In retirement, the foundation is your peace of mind, right? That's the main thing, right? And so the thing in the things you want to have in the foundation is if you need income replacement, you want that in the foundation. I met with the lady yesterday and today, right? We met back to back days, and one of the things she said was she wanted to have at least $8,000 a month in retirement. Her pension after taxes, her pension and her Social Security gave her around $5,700, right? And so she's like, I just want this 8,000. She didn't need it, but she wanted it because she said, I want to be able to spoil my grandkids when I want to. I want to be able to just take off and travel when I want to. I just want that money to continue to flow into my account. I just want to be able to give when I'm called upon to do so. So she said, okay. I said, okay. So you need an extra about $2,300 a month. We made sure she had a lot in her TSP. She had 1.1 million in her TSP. So we said, okay. We set some money aside in the protected bucket, and we said, okay, we'll set. I think we set around some 450 aside in a protected bucket, and we said, okay, this bucket will pay you that income as what consistently. It doesn't matter if the market goes up or down. This bucket will pay you that, and this bucket would also help you with some long-term care needs that she had, right? So that gave her a foundation. Once we set that in place, she said that that was her biggest fear in retirement. We took care of that. She still had almost 700,000 in her TSP, or will I should say, because we're in the process. And that money, now that we have that in place, we could do things like tax planning, making sure she pays down some of the taxes she owes on that 1.1 million. We can make sure we can still continue to advance the money within the C fund, because now that money we can put it at quote unquote risk in the C fund, because the C fund over the last 10 years, as of today, has returned 13%. Now, as you all know, the C fund can be volatile like it was earlier in the year, but then it bounces back. Well, the problem is when you're in retirement, it can be kind of nerve-wracking when you see the money that you're no longer contributing to go down, right? But because we have a strategy with her where it's like, okay, if the market goes down, you don't have to worry about it because your income's not threatened. Your long-term care money's put away. That's not threatened. And those are her two biggest things. Those two things are not affected. So, because that would be the things she, in her mind, would cause her to have some level of panic. So I'm like, as long as that's not going to stop, we can wait out the market. And if we wait out the market, we typically win, right? And within that, we did some tax planning, inflation planning. And I've talked about that on many other webinars. Won't go too deep into it right now. But that's the advantage of having a plan in place, right? And when you have those things, you don't have to play that 4% rule, because that just doesn't apply to federal employees because you have a pension, right? And so, starting point in retirement, a lot of times people are at 4,200. It's just an example, 42,000 a year. TSP is 650. But the 8 years later, that balance, and these are conservative numbers, could be at 1.2 million, right? Family vacation house paid for. And we've seen that many times where clients who just don't touch their TSP are now buying vacation homes because they're like, well, Mrs. Smith, I don't have any need for this money. I want to have a house that my kids and I myself my grandkids, we can call home every summer and create memories. So this is just my investment back into the family. They're moving down somewhere in the South, or somewhere, that's relatively cheap, buying the house that they want. And that's the family investment. And it doesn't really, impact their retirement too much because they've had that compound interest over time, right? And so, that's the way that we try to get our clients to think. Think more wealth building, less scarcity. Because to be honest, if you're from my culture, a lot of us grew up with that scarcity mentality. And it's hard to break it. I struggle with it too. But we have to start thinking more on the offense rather than the defense if we're going to be able to become job makers instead of job takers, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to expose our kids, expose our grandkids to things they've never seen. And we have that opportunity as we build wealth, right? And so, people in the private sector, I mean, God bless them, but it's hard to pass down a depleted 401k that you're just living off of 4% on, right? Social Security ends at death. If you don't, it's different for them. And for you have survivor benefits. There's no survivor benefits on the 401k. I mean, you give them the money, but it's not an ongoing pension that's not drawing down on the actual money that that they have, right? Again, $1 million TSP balance, financial house framework. You pass that on to your kids, not just the money, but you also pass on the system to your kids, which is a generational mindset, generational wealth mindset, which is super important. And so, the reason why this only works for federal employees is because you have your first pension, TSP, solid investments that you have, and it's something that we love to help you all set up, right? And so, one of the things that we do with Fed Legacy is we do have our financial house framework. It comes as part of our TSP finish line process, and so one of the things we'll do is help you set that up, help you build your financial house framework, help you with the federal income advantage optimization, and at the end of the day, have those legacy wealth strategies, right? And this is something that we at Fed Legacy specialize in. I'm talking about it a lot more now because it's critical. As I see a lot of federal employees retiring, a lot of people are reaching out to you, trying to get you to give them all their money. If the person's not talking, not just saying the word generational wealth because it's a buzzword, but really talking about real wealth building strategies, not just put your money here so it can grow. Like really having those deep dive conversations that can really change your family starts, because that is the opportunity. And do business with people like that. That are willing to go into real wealth building, really go into your family dynamics, really help you grow that. Because at the end of the day, when you're doing retirement planning, the person that you work with on that type stuff is a person that you should feel comfortable with talking to 10 years down the line when you're ready to do something that you love, right? Or in a financial crisis, right? Whether it's emergency or something like that, you want that person that you're building with to be somebody like that. So we pride ourselves in that at Fed Legacy. We'd love to be, a resource for you. If you want to book a call, you could just put plan in the chat. We'll make sure my team will reach out to you. If you want to go schedule it yourself, you can go to fedlegacycall.com.